visitors there.
And it looks as though he's going to have to spend a second night here, although his spokesman says he's determined to leave by tomorrow. He's still recovering from that operation to fix his broken leg. And although staff said the operation went very well, he's still in very good spirits.
Yes, at the moment Michael is resting and he's watching television. His wife is with him. He thanks everyone for their good wishes. His wounds are healing well and he's moving his legs and he's starting physiotherapy.
Well, Schumacher's said to be still in a bit of pain, although he's feeling quite relaxed. He's had a lot of visitors here today. His brother Ralph has been to see him, and Damon Hill popped in for 15 minutes as well. And he's had a chance to have a look at the video of the crash itself. Now, he says he knew there was something up with the brakes, but the really terrifying moment for him came afterwards when he was trapped. Well, a lot of questions still to be answered about exactly what happened, and questions too are being raised about the safety of the track itself. Paul Newman reports.
Michael Schumacher's ambition to be acclaimed Ferrari's first world champion for 20 years was wiped out in a few horrifying seconds at Silverstone. As his car careered into a tyre wall at more than 70 miles an hour, it evoked memories of the fateful crash which killed Ayrton Senna in 1994. Schumacher was fortunate to escape serious injury, although he expects to be out of Formula One for up to 3 months. He probably owes his life to safety changes introduced after Senna's accident.
Fortunately, the cars are very strong. It's a lot which has been done on safety, and I wonder what would have happened a few years ago with such an accident.
Schumacher's car is now undergoing a series of tests, but there's little doubt the impact of the head-on collision was reduced by recent modifications. The front nose cone is designed to give way in the event of a crash, and the driver himself is given greater protection in a padded cockpit. But the question is whether the rear brakes failed, as claimed by Schumacher. The president of the sport's governing body told me the evidence gathered so far supports that theory.
The data we have is certainly not inconsistent with that, and further investigation will show what happened, but it was certainly not an ordinary accident. It wasn't a question of him simply going too fast and losing control. Something undoubtedly happened.
Something mechanical?
Probably. It's, again, one we've got to be very careful, but probably.
There's been some concern that the gravel trap at the side of the circuit should have slowed Schumacher's car far more quickly than it did. The race winner, David Coulthard, was relaxing on the golf course today, but issues of safety were uppermost in his mind.
If you have a spinning car, then definitely gravel works very well. But as we've seen many times before, if you have a car going straight, then it doesn't do anything for you. The key thing is that the car should never be able to penetrate the tyre barrier and hit the wall at the other side, which I think happened in Michael's case.
Officials here at the London headquarters of Formula One say it'll be several months before the full report into the Schumacher crash is completed. Only then will a detailed analysis of the causes of the accident be made public. Paul Newman, BBC News at the Formula One Association.
Now, Ferrari are hoping that Michael Schumacher can be back in the driver's seat before the end of the season. Others aren't quite so optimistic. Joining me now is Jonathan Palmer. He's a former Formula One racing driver and also a doctor. Jonathan, when do you think he's going to be back behind the wheel?
Well, that was a clean break, but it was a massive impact, a high-energy impact and fracture, and that's going to slow the healing process. He'll certainly miss 4 races. He might get out for the end of September at the Nürburgring in Germany, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him miss the whole of the season now.
So championships hopes blown, basically.
Sadly, very much so. I'm afraid he's going to miss those 4 races. Mika Hakkinen and Eddie Irvine are going to be extending their lead or getting ahead of him. No, I think it's all over for this year.
Now, you actually had a similar crash on the same stretch of track at Silverstone. How long is it before a driver regains his confidence to get back behind the wheel?
Well, this is the first time that Michael Schumacher has injured himself, and that's going to make him aware of his own vulnerability now. He will get right back to that dominant form he's had, but it'll take a while. I can see it being next year.
And we were hearing in Paul's piece issues still about safety. Safety could be improved further. Do you agree with that? Do you think it could be improved further at Silverstone?
Well, let's make it clear. The safety standards are very, very high. Of course, safety can always be improved in any walk of life. The tyre wall did a great job. The gravel trap did not, and I'm sure that'll be changed for next year.
Jonathan Palmer, thank you very much. Well, there's little doubt that that tyre wall did help to save his life. And Schumacher's spokesman said to us earlier that he does feel very lucky, having seen the video, to be alive at all. Hugh.
OK, Sian, thanks very much indeed. After last summer's bomb attacks on the US embassies in Kenya.
The UK's major airports are braced for the start of their busiest period of the year, but airport staff are bracing themselves to deal with an increasingly hostile public. According to some workers, passengers annoyed with cancellations, queues and delays are turning their anger on them, sometimes violently. Most of the 2.5 million holidaymakers leaving Luton Airport this summer are polite and patient, but staff say the number of abusive travellers is growing.
Only last week I was physically assaulted by a passenger with a 15-kilo bag who wasn't allowed to take it on board, and I was hit in the stomach with it.
They've missed their flight, they've come in, they've been stuck in a motorway, accident on the motorway, and they just start shouting at me.
Staff at Luton are trained to deal with ground rage, but the union, which represents most of the UK's air workers, says airlines must do more to protect their staff.
Whilst frustration is understandable amongst the passengers, there's no justification for the kind of abuse and indeed sometimes very cruel physical violence that is meted out to the reception staff. We want them protected, we don't want them assaulted.
Most ground rage incidents are blamed on frustration due to cancelled or delayed flights. Now the government's written to the big carriers, urging them to improve their poor track records. More than 3/4 of delays are due to airlines, although some delays are outside their control.
I've just come from Heathrow. I've seen a lot of families going through Heathrow, some with tiny babies. I can imagine just how unpleasant it would be for them, as well as for business people. There is a real economic cost in delays.
Today, passenger watchdogs issue guidelines to airports on how best to deal with flight delays. Travellers should be kept up to date on flight times. Catering facilities should be able to meet demand. And seating arrangements should be adequate so passengers can wait in comfort. Denise Mahoney, BBC News, Luton Airport.
Scotland's football coach Craig Brown is denying allegations of religious bigotry and says he will cooperate with any inquiry. A Sunday newspaper claim now taking action to find out who's telling the truth about that impressive degree and who isn't. Aminata Fauna has been investigating.
This is a man with a mission. He's one of a growing number of CV detectives hired by firms to check the background of job applicants. Today it's a simple inquiry to find out whether someone really has the 2-1 degree he claims.
I have. I've looked in his file and he actually got a 2-2.
Oh, did he? He suggests he had a 2-1. Phil will have to advise the client. He's in the Open University.
Companies operating on the internet offer fake qualifications, including degrees from hundreds of different universities. For as little as £150, you can be the owner of a convincing Oxford University BA certificate.
This is the sort of thing you'll end up with. You can access some sites that will allow you to pinpoint up to 3,000 universities that give you an insight to what the universities offer, when their graduations take place, and indeed what the environment's all about.
Around a quarter of applicants lie on their CVs.
We've developed a sort of give-it-a-go culture where people think because a large proportion of employers, something like 30%, don't check references, don't check qualifications and experience, that it's almost worth the shot.
Among the financial institutions in the City of London, job applicants with bogus credentials pose a particular threat. Recent high-profile fraud cases have demonstrated the growing need to screen prospective employees. Kroll is the world's largest business investigation company. In 80% of cases, fraud is committed by an insider.
My favourite example is a woman who was working as an accountant, whose CV showed that she'd spent 18 months working on contract in South Africa. I think she assumed that nobody would bother to check. In fact, she was spending 18 months in prison for fraud. And what's more, she wasn't an accountant at all.
A growing and more fluid workforce make it increasingly vital that firms check credentials. Aminata Fauna, BBC News.
Now for a fully qualified look at the weather, here